What's going on, y'all? This is Francisco with Covenant Dispatch LLC, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Guys, if this is your first time visiting this channel, like I always say, please consider hitting that subscribe button right under this video. If you like our content, right next to that subscribe button, hit that like button so that this video can reach a more broader audience and help those who are looking for this kind of information. And then lastly, hit that notification bell. That way you guys can be alerted for when we do post future content, all of which I'm positive you guys will enjoy. So with that being said, guys, I want to just jump right into this video. I don't want to elaborate too much. Before I jump into this video, as you can see on the title, and as you can kind of see up here on the whiteboard, we're going to talk about how to boost your carrier morale. So basically what that means is I want to talk about ways that you can attract carriers to want to utilize your dispatching services, and then also ways that you can keep carriers that are signed on with you. So this is the biggest problem with independent freight dispatchers, is finding drivers and then keeping drivers or carriers as clients or as people who utilize your services, or as companies who utilize your services. So we're going to dive right into that. Before we do, though, quick couple things. Number one, I'm using this mic, as you can see. Sometimes I clip it right here. The reason why I have it up to my mouth is because I feel like the sound quality isn't as good as when I put it here. So I'm just going to have it up here like a microphone. Secondly, you might see like a little glare in the middle of the whiteboard. Reason being is because the lighting is kind of glaring right off the middle of the whiteboard, which I can't help because it reflects, because it's a whiteboard. So just ignore that. I'll try not to write anything in the middle so that you guys can see everything. And then lastly, we do provide online trainings. We have an online pre-recorded dispatch course that breaks down everything you need to know to start your own dispatch company from home, your own freight dispatch company from home, from A to Z, step by step. We have a startup kit, which is a more cost-effective way, which is basically an ebook, all the templates and along with that, and just a more cost-effective way to learn. But of course, it doesn't have the video modules like the freight dispatch course does. And then we have a box truck course, and then we do phone consultations. We do all that stuff, right? So we basically help and train people that want to know about trucking and independent freight dispatching. So as you can see on this channel, we mainly talk about independent freight dispatching because that's what we started talking about when I first made this channel. So we're going to jump right into this video. By the way, all of those links to all of those trainings and things like that can be found in the description under this video and pinned to our comments if you were wondering. So we're going to talk about boosting your carrier morale. So the way, and again, this is going to be very quick, so hopefully you guys keep up with me. I don't want to be on here too long because there's no need to be. This is a very straightforward video. So we're going to talk about two things, lumper and detention. These are two services that you can capitalize on to not only attract carriers as a service that you can offer, but to also just boost your carrier morale. These are just things that you can do that your carrier, I'm sure, will appreciate, just because, and I'll explain it in a little bit, just because of how it conveniences them. And so the first thing is a lumper. Let's explain what that is. Now I'm going to give you guys, I'm going to take out my phone and give you guys the actual textbook definition, and then I'll explain it in layman's terms and ways that you can understand it a little bit more better. So a lumper is a third-party operation hired by a shipper, carrier, broker, or warehouse to unload the freight from a truck trailer when it arrives at a warehouse facility. So basically that looks like this, and I'm doing this very basic, right? Let's just say this is a warehouse facility. You got your freight in there, and then you got your carrier that comes, and they need to, pick up freight. So you got your carrier here, right? And I'll go ahead and label that. You got your carrier here. They're going to the shipper, and they're picking up freight. That's what it looks like typically. So they come to get loaded up. Now, typically the shipper will have employees, or they'll have people that will load this freight onto your carrier's truck. But sometimes what happens is shippers will pay a third-party company to come in, and they will be the ones loading or unloading your truck. So let's say your carrier is going to pick up the freight. They need to be loaded. So instead of having their guys do it at the warehouse, what they do is they'll pay this guy, right, this company, to come, and then what they'll do is they'll take this freight and they'll load it onto your truck instead of the shipper's employees doing it. There's a bunch of different reasons why a shipper would decide to do that. Now, keep in mind, sometimes the driver might go and hire a lumper to come and do it. So, but this is what it will typically look like in a case for a dispatcher. This is why I'm using this example. So this is how you come in as a dispatcher. what typically happens in this scenario is when the carrier comes to pick up the freight at the shipper, what happens is if they get loaded by a lumper, the shipper will not allow the carrier to leave, or they won't give them what's called a bill of lading, their sheet, which is basically like a receipt detailing the load. And this is basically proof that the carrier picked up the load. The shipper won't give them this BOL until they pay off this lumper. So the lumper will come to the carrier and they'll give them an invoice. Sometimes they send it through a text message. There's a bunch of different ways. And the carrier then has to pay right then and there. They have to pay before they can even leave with the freight. Now, how does this allow you to offer a service as a dispatcher? Because what happens is, let's just say this is the broker, right? Let's say this load was booked through a broker, right? And you're the dispatcher here. So this is you, the dispatcher. Now what you can do, and forgive me for my handwriting, you guys know what I'm saying. Now what you do in this typical situation, once the carrier pays the lumper, they can now leave with that load. And then what they do is then they turn around and they go to the broker and they say, hey, we need that money, right? We had to come out of pocket to pay a lumper at a facility to pick up freight. We need a reimbursement. And most brokers are going to pay that reimbursement. As a matter of fact, before you even book the load with the broker, those things will be outlined within the rate confirmation. So the broker typically always will reimburse you on that lumper fee. All you have to do is send them the receipt and they'll give you a revised rate confirmation. So the rate confirmation is basically the sheet that the carrier and the broker came into an agreement with as far as the rate that they will do that load for. The broker will give you a revised one. They'll give the carrier a revised one, so that way the carrier can get their money back for that lumper. So now here's the thing. Sometimes it might take a couple of days for them to reimburse. Sometimes they do it right away. But here's how you can come in as the dispatcher. You can say, look, you can tell your carrier, you can say, listen, we will pay that lumper fee. Like, for example, I'll give you a scenario. Let's say the carrier calls you as the dispatcher. They say, hey, I'm at a facility and they're having me pay a lumper. It's $220. Sometimes carriers just, you might think they have a lot of money because they're truck drivers, but sometimes they go through things. And so the carrier might say, hey, it sucks because I don't have the finances to be able to pay it right now. Or even if they did have it, you can say, look, we will pay that. We will cover it, right? Send us the information. We'll cover it. You go on about your merry way. Go ship the load. And since you're already dealing with the broker anyways and facilitating that load, you reach out to the broker and you say, hey, on behalf of my carrier, we need a revised rate con sheet. And then you add whatever the lumper fee was, and then you forward that receipt over to the broker, and then the broker will give you a revised rate con, and then the carrier will get paid for that. And so now what you do as the dispatcher is when it's time for you to invoice the carrier, you say, hey, you add that fee as a reimbursement. So at the end of the day, the carrier is still paying you and still paying that lumper. You just give them more convenience because you pay it initially, and it kind of relieves them. It gives them like a blanket of relief. Whereas though they don't have to pay that, because again, we don't know what carriers go through. Sometimes they might have a bad week and they just can't pay it. Or if they do pay it, it brings them down to, little to no money or whatever the case may be. So it just adds a blanket. So basically what it does is it shifts the liability onto you as the dispatcher. Because of course anything can go wrong, but you're dealing with the broker anyway. So you can fight for that reimbursement. And so that's what that looks like. I'm not going to elaborate anymore. If you do have any more questions concerning this, just put it in the comments. Let's jump right to detention. So this is another thing that you can offer. Here's what detention looks like. Really, really quick. You got your shipper, right? And you got the loads, right? So what happens is your carrier, you're a dispatcher, your carrier goes to a facility, right, to go get loaded up. And when they get there, let's say they get there at 8 a.m. Well, let's say they get there at 8 a.m., but they don't leave until 1 p.m. Well, that means that they were there for what, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1. They were there for 5 hours, right? So that means that they were there for 5 hours waiting for this load to get loaded, right? Now, this has nothing to do with the lumper. This is now detention. So let me give you guys real quick, since I kind of moved past it fast. The textbook definition for detention. Detention is charged when a truck driver arrives at a location and ends up waiting to be loaded or unloaded, in most cases, Carriers allow for some free hours per driver, but they will charge you an hourly rate after that time allotment is up. Drivers get paid by moving and delivering loads, not by sitting on them. So detention pay is typically done per hour. So what happens is this: your carrier goes to pick up a load. The load was meant to be picked up at 8, but they don't leave until 1. That means 5 hours pass. Typically, and this is just like the standard. The standard is that there's a 2-hour grace period that the driver, waits for the load. Now, that 2-hour grace period would be from 8 to 10, but from 10 to 1 is 3 hours, right? So that means from 8 to 10 was a grace period. Anytime after that grace period, every hour after that is considered detention pay. So what happens is, in this case, that means that the shipper owes 3 hours of detention pay. So what happens is this. That's poor handwriting, but you guys can hear me. So what happens is the shipper gives the carrier what's called a BOL, and I talked about it earlier. It's called a bill of lading. It's basically like a receipt, outlining what kind of shipment it is, how much it weighs, what's the commodity, all that good stuff. This is proof for the carrier that the load was taken care of. That way they can get paid themselves when they invoice or whether they factor or whatever. So what happens is the carrier has to get 3 things done, and I'm going to write it here at the very bottom in order to get paid for detention. The carrier has to get a signature from the shipper that outlines 3 things. Number 1, it has to have the date. Then it has to have the time in and the time out. So it has to have the date, the time the driver got there, and the time the driver, got out. So you say, would they know that? Most places you have to check in at a gate. Either way, you can supply proof by taking a picture at a certain time at the facility, or when you check in, you can have them sign it immediately, the time in, and then of course when it's time to time out. Now that's for the carrier to worry about, right? If the carrier really wants to get paid for detention, they'll make sure they do all that. But as the dispatcher, you can inform them in case they don't know. So once all that is said and done, once again, the broker, which I'm not going to write any more stick figures, but the broker then has to reimburse the carrier on that detention pay. Now, I'm sorry, it's not a reimbursement because it's not like the carrier came out of pocket, but the broker has to cover those costs and pay that extra money. So same scenario, the carrier would, in a typical situation without the dispatcher, the carrier would reach out to the broker and ask for a revised rate con with the adjusted detention pay. So that way that they can get paid more for sitting there and waiting. Here's how you come in once again as the dispatcher. As the dispatcher, you can add once again a blanket of, this is supposed to be a hat, but whatever. You can add a blanket of comfort by telling the carrier, hey, we'll pay the detention pay in the meantime. And once we pay that detention pay, it's all good because the dispatcher deals with the broker anyway. So they'll reach out to the broker, ask for the revised rate con. As long as your carrier can supply to you a bill of lading with the time in and the time out and the signature, that's all the proof you need to give to the broker to get payment, to get paid for that extra detention pay. And so once again, it's paid every hour. Usually, sometimes it's like 25 an hour, 30 an hour, whatever it is. You can pay it to your carrier in the meantime. And then once it comes time to invoice them, wait for that revised rate con to come in for the broker to pay for that. And then when you invoice them, they pay you back anyways. It's just giving them like I said, a blanket of comfort. Sometimes, they get on edge like, I've been waiting here all day. And you say, listen, no worries. We'll pay you the fee in the meantime, and then we'll just reimburse you for the money back. So another thing that you can do if you really want to be kind is you can pay it for them and just only have them pay 75% of it back. Because you are the one who booked the load, even though you can't control the detention. It's just something that you can do, right? That I would only do that for people who've been with you for a long time. Anyways, these are some of the different things that you can do. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you want me to do another video going a little bit more into it, let me know. I like to do well-detailed videos. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll see you guys in the next video.